Welcome to Technado with Don Pizzette, featuring sysadmin expert Don Pizzette, security specialist Daniel Lowry, and Peter.
Hello and welcome to Technado. I'm your host, Peter Van Rysdam, joined, as always, by Don Pizzette as yet another hurricane bears down on us. How excited are you?
You know, it's funny. Like we've had so many of these. It's almost like this is the season for hurricanes.
Yes,
you know, it's
it's nice. 'Tis the season.
When does hurricane season end?
After Thanksgiving, I think.
I think when we're all dead.
Yeah.
You give thanks for surviving hurricane season.
I'm actually heading down to Orlando for IT Nation, which is
It's nice knowing you.
into the teeth of the storm. Which they canceled their event at SeaWorld. They had rented out SeaWorld. Now they're just going to do it in the hotel ballroom.
I thought SeaWorld was off limits. Don't they like hurt whales
Well,
or
they
something?
do. But to me, I'm like,
I didn't know the
you're already
Starlight
underwater.
Motel had a ballroom.
Yeah, you're already underwater. How much worse can it get?
All right.
True. Well, and Daniel, how are you today?
I'm very well, thank you, sir.
Apparently completely unaware of the hurricane, like a true
So
Floridian.
it's funny that the last hurricane, I literally had no idea it was coming until everybody started buying stuff.
Mhm.
And I was like, what is going on?
Yeah.
And they're like, there's a hurricane. I was
Like, where's all the water and ramen?
oh.
There's a hurricane. Stock up on ammunition.
Yeah.
Because shooting at it is one of the best ways.
Well, what I like to do is when the hurricane blows through and everybody's desolate and there's those smart people that kind of stocked up, I use those guns to go steal their
Sure.
things.
Sure.
Natural selection.
That's how it works.
I feel like I should say PSA, do not shoot at the
Don't do that. That's a joke. It's
Uh,
called jokes,
It's
people.
humor. All right, well, let's get to the tech news that has happened this week. Our first article comes to us from boxofcables.dev. Microsoft's CBL-Delridge is 404. Long live CBL Mariner. All right, so we've talked about CBL Mariner a little bit. I don't remember. What is Delridge? That's the previous?
So it's kind of interesting, right? So Microsoft was outed last year as having their own internal distribution of Linux, which was called CBL Mariner. It is a in-house developed Linux that it uses RPM packages, kind of like RHEL or Fedora, but it is not based on RHEL or CentOS. It's completely built from scratch. And the CBL stands for Common Base Linux. The idea was any internal Microsoft project that needed to be built on Linux could use this CBL, this Common Base Linux, and that's what they would build off
That makes
of.
more sense. I was wondering how they got that oil into the distribution of Linux.
That's CBD.
I was like, you buy this at a gas station? Like, what?
That's it. That's it exactly.
CBL.
It's the smoothest Linux distro out there.
Yeah, it is.
So that was interesting, and you'd think Common Base Linux this would be the one that they use, but they kind of surprised us where a few really kind of sharp observers noticed that there was a second Linux distribution being maintained internal to Microsoft called CBL-Delridge. CBL-Delridge is Common Base Linux, but it's actually based on Debian. So it uses .deb packages, and it's not built from scratch. It is actually a kind of repackaging of Debian, which makes it a little more more compatible with like Ubuntu packages and so on. And people did think it was odd, like how many common base Linuxes can you have, or Linuxi,
Or
whatever.
it's not common.
Yeah. Well, apparently Microsoft agreed because the repositories for package updates for Delridge all went offline this week. So if you're running Delridge, you can no longer update it. You can no longer install packages because the common repo or the central repo is all gone. You'd have to like manually load packages, which is a pain.
You sure that somebody just wasn't taking CBD oil and kind of like, dozed off and accidentally shut the thing down and just waiting for Earl to wake up?
Fell asleep on the button.
Yeah.
I can't speak with authority on that, but I did live in Seattle for a while, and I would say the odds of them being under the influence are pretty high.
And it wasn't legal when you were there. Yeah, and now it's legal. So.
I don't think the legality really mattered. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the general consensus is that Microsoft is consolidating down, and there's certain things like the Azure console that switched from Delridge over to Mariner, and so it looks like Microsoft is consolidating and saying CBL Mariner is the one true Linux, and people are just waiting for Microsoft to release this thing in some functional form where you can use it in your own production environments. They do distribute ISO images. You can download it and install it. I've run it in VMs. Actually, I think I have a VM on my laptop right now that's CBL Mariner. It's neat. It's fast. It's stable. So if you wanted to use it in production workloads, you probably could. Microsoft doesn't recommend that. They use it for their Azure services. So it's production capable, but Microsoft 100% controls it, and they could cancel it tomorrow if they wanted, and you wouldn't have any control over that.
Well, that's never happened with a Linux distro before. So.
Yeah.
When they say cancel, I mean you would still have it on your computer if you download it. You just wouldn't have any support or.
Yeah, I mean, if they shut down the central repos, so now you can't install packages or do any updates automatically. You have to manually do stuff. That would be a nightmare for a production system. I wouldn't do that until Microsoft officially says we're now opening this up for public use.
So do they use it? I mean, I know so much of the Azure servers are on Linux, but that's not what they use on these boxes.
No, these are used more in their Azure Cloud Shell. WSL even uses it to an extent before it lays other distributions on top of it. So it's really used for their internal projects. Their load balancers use this. There's some of their database, their big data products use this. So it's all stuff that's kind of obfuscated from the end user. It's hard for us to see that that's what's being used.
Just so you know, for those I'm sure that were wondering, Delridge is a district in West Seattle. It runs along Longfellow Creek. Down to the Duwamish River.
I figured it ran along the ridge over by the Dell.
It doesn't appear to, no. But I'm curious, so was CBL Mariner, I mean, I know there's the Seattle Mariners. Is there like a neighborhood called Mariner? Or is it just, do you think it's based on the baseball team?
I don't think so. I don't know. I mean, the baseball team got the name because Seattle's a port city.
Marine,
and, when you watch what was that crab fishing show?
Deadliest Catch.
There we go. Like all those guys, the Deadliest Catch guys would come down, and they were based out of Seattle.
It's got to be the worst season this year. They canceled the crab season. Did you hear that? Because the crabs have all gone north. I guess or they can't find. There's no crabs.
They can't find the crabs.
And
it's not like they were pulling them in by the bucket.
First of all, go to Tampa. But they, I think they're under the ice now, so they just canceled the season this year. So that's going to be just a terrible show.
Dude, plus, those people make a lot of money off of that. And if you're now not getting that money.
This is a chance for the show to pivot, though, right? And do they resort to cannibalism? We don't know. We have to wait and see.
Yeah,
the deadliest crew.
Well, I think you still put the pots in the water, and you just see what comes up, and we sell it. Yeah, it's a delicacy. All right, well, so you cannot get Mariner anymore, but you can get Delridge. Is that what we're saying?
Other way around.
You can't get the Delridge,
but you can get Mariner.
Get that sweet Mariner.
And if you want to experiment with Mariner, like I said, it's good. It's got most of the stuff you want to run like a Node.js application or Docker or whatever. It's got that functionality built into it, and you can download an ISO image right from Microsoft's GitHub repositories.
I know you said Microsoft's probably not like, hey, use this in production yet, but there's the Linux community is rife with people that are like, hold my beer.
Yeah, I can do it.
I can make this. Let me write some scripts.
Recreational Linux.
Yeah, and then I'll make this in a GitHub. This is going to be amazing.
Till it gets shut down.
It's actually a pretty neat distro. There's a lot of Linux enthusiasts that are really anti-Mariner because it's Microsoft.
Yeah.
But I said they built it from scratch, but they actually took some of the better components from... what is VMware's Linux distro called that runs under VMware ESX? I've forgotten what it's called, but they took some of the security and networking functionality from that. They grabbed from Fedora. They grabbed from a few different places to build what they felt was a really stable, really robust distro.
Bodhi Linux? Bodhi? B-O-D-H-I?
No, that one doesn't sound familiar.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it's the Patrick Swayze Linux.
Yeah.
Point Break.
Yeah.
All right. This is
original.
All right. Now we're talking.
And we're only talking original.
Yeah.
Yes,
they remade that.
I didn't even know that.
Oh, they ruined
I'm
it.
so sorry you had to learn
With
this
who?
way.
Like Channing Tatum or somebody?
I don't know.
You might be right. Hold on. I can't remember.
While he's looking that up, so we watched it. I watched it with my oldest son. Hadn't seen it in a long, long time.
Yeah.
Laughed my butt off when the Red Hot Chili Peppers try to act, as you do.
It's always funny.
But after finishing the movie...
Would be a waste of time.
I don't remember the movie being as boring as it is. It is a boring movie.
Well, because there's a lot of of the whole love story part of it. And
yeah,
I
want to learn to surf.
Yeah, shut up.
I got to go to Tashi Station, get some power inverters.
And going back and watching, I watched Orange is the New Black on Netflix. The love interest is like an old crazy lady. Because I'm like, who is this lady? And then I had to look her up.
Why is she trying to get on and off the bus so many times?
Luke Bracey. None of these names are
none of these names.
Yeah.
There's no what was the FBI, the other FBI agent's name?
Oh, that was Gary Busey.
Gary Busey.
He was
Yeah.
Pappas.
I can never remember if it's Nick Nolte or Gary Busey.
Yeah,
It just made me
Gary
think of
Busey.
Roadhouse 2. Remember the
his
fact
son,
that Roadhouse
right.
2 exists, but it was Gary Busey's son.
Jake Busey
takes over. As
He was the bad
bouncer.
guy.
Oh, he was the bad guy. That's
Yeah,
right.
he was the bad guy. Yeah.
This could be the quickest we've ever gone off the rails.
One article
But it
in.
might be the best rails we've ever gone off, though. Like, we're
But yeah,
talking Point Break here.
It's a big extreme sports movie, the new one, and not worth it. I think I saw it on a plane because I was trapped,
All right.
and I wanted to jump out like they did.
Go,
but
that's what I was telling my wife. It's like for a movie that was about extreme stuff, parachuting, surfing, it was boring. and when Keanu's like shooting his gun in the air because he doesn't want to shoot Patrick Swayze, I'm like, they don't have a bond at this point. They just surf together. Just
That's
shoot
true.
the guy.
That's true. Yeah, maybe Patrick Swayze had a little more gravitas than you gave him credit for.
He did have nice hair.
He did
There's
indeed.
a code among surfers.
Yeah.
All
Damn
right.
you, pancreatic cancer. Damn you, straight to hell.
It was weird when Swayze came back at the end of the movie and they made pottery together. I think that's the same. All right, let's move on to our next article from theregister.com. Version 252 of System D. I know I always say that one wrong because I look at it and think.
Just think Tenacious D.
I think it's like doctor related, like System MD. All right, so version
System D.
252 of System D, as expected, locks down the Linux boot process. Why would they do that?
So, this is one that if you just kind of glance at the headline, it sounds like something bad. It's actually a good thing. Well,
They got COVID.
I guess let
and
me
it's
back
just like
off of
COVID
that.
all through Linux.
Yeah.
We're like, we got to lock down.
Got a zero boot process policy.
It certainly does lock things down. You might remember when UEFI BIOS was really kind of picking up steam and or just the EFI bootloader in general, where they could do digitally signed bootloaders and digitally signed kernels for operating systems to ensure that malware operators couldn't get in and put hooks underneath the kernel. Photon OS. That's the name of the VMware.
I love that.
10 minutes later.
I love how like that neuron just fired.
I just started talking about kernels and immediately remembered Photon
he
OS.
gets
Right, so
Can we edit that into earlier? Yeah.
back on track. So you could do digitally signed kernels, digitally signed bootloaders, and so if you got bootloader malware, it's impossible for antivirus to see that because it loads before the AV, so it can hide itself. And now you've got like the early rootkits, just really, really hard to detect. So EFI was designed to fix that. But a lot of people got worried about it. Like, oh, is that going to kill open source? Can we not have open source OSs if they have to be digitally signed and somebody like Microsoft or Lenovo controls the keys? Is that going to be a problem? Turned out to not be a big deal at all. And it's easy to get your operating system signed. But with System D 252, they've rolled out a new feature that's actually really cool where not only is the kernel digitally signed, but the whole init process is signed as well. And they did that by rolling them together. They've combined the init RD or just the init system, the initialization system, with the kernel, rolled it all into one big file that can now be digitally signed. And so that's really giving you like a fully trusted boot environment when your OS starts. Now, you can still have malware like crazy after you load up, right? That's your own problem, but you can trust the operating system at that point because it's been digitally signed and is tamper resistant.
Okay, I got a question then. So I'm thinking boot process, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I make custom things to do in the boot process. Can I modify what goes on during boot and then still work, or is there like a lot of hoops you got to jump through? Like, how's that work?
With System D, you never actually modify your init anymore.
Okay.
You modify targets or units.
Yeah.
So you have System D units, which are just text files that define what you want to happen when the system starts. And it might be things like mounting storage, opening network sockets, starting timers, cron jobs, all that stuff. You still have full control over that. You can customize what the init is doing. You just can't customize the init, the initialization process itself. That's now locked in with the kernel and secured. Now, if I was an attacker and I wanted to hide what I was doing, modifying the init process is a super sneaky way to do that because you could have a digitally signed kernel that you can't tamper with, but if the init binary is not signed, you could put a malicious one in that ran all sorts of tasks in the background that nobody knew about. Init runs as a system service, so it would have full access to the system, and you could mask everything you do.
How long before we are reading the article that says accidentally left open or whatever, and somebody gained access to that, and now the digital signatures are, even though they're legit, they've been compromised. We read about that kind of stuff from happening all the
Could
time.
happen.
It could happen. I'm
happen,
not saying
yeah.
it's going to. Don't give me that.
Yep.
I just think that it will.
And revoking a certificate for something that's effectively a hardware check is really hard to
Yeah.
do. I mean, you can revoke the certificate, but it's hard to update systems to
Right.
be able to reflect that. So it would be a challenge. It could happen.
Mm.
Yeah.
Nightmare scenario.
But I think it's a neat security feature. I think some people are scared of it. It's an optional thing right now. Systemd version 252 is not in any of the currently supported versions of Linux. So like the latest version of Ubuntu, RHEL, Debian, none of them have 252 yet. But probably this time next year, we'll start to see it pop up in our distros.
Cool.
All right. There you go. All right, our next article comes to us from tomshardware.com, and they've really gone creative here, and they're using a stock image of a fisherman as opposed to a stock image of a shipping container, as they normally do in Dropbox-related articles. But this one says fisherman, with a PH, of course. Fishermen reel in Dropbox's private GitHub repos. No customer data or passwords were affected, so they say. But how did they get a hold of this stuff?
So the attackers in this case did a traditional phishing campaign, likely came in via emails because they were impersonating Circle CI, which is a continuous integration platform that Dropbox uses. So they sent some fake emails. One user actually clicked on the email and then authenticated, punched in their username and password, so their credentials. Now, Circle CI uses GitHub for authentication. So when the user was authenticating in Circle CI, they were providing their GitHub credentials, their username, their password, and then their MFA token.
That's all she wrote.
And that's all she wrote. Yep, that gave the attackers access to GitHub. And from there, they were able to spread out. What the attackers do is once they get into GitHub, they don't know how long they're going to have access. So the first thing they do is generate either an API key or an access token, so that even if the password gets reset, they still have that token and they can still get in there. And then they just started pilfering the repositories. They copied 130 code repositories while they were in Dropbox's system, so they got access to a lot of stuff. Now, the first question I always ask is, are users affected, right? The second question is, did their actual product source code get out? And in this case, the answer to those two questions is no. So no user data got out, and their actual platform code didn't get out either. Apparently, they're really strict about who has access to that, which is good for them. This
Well, it
particular
worked out in their favor, didn't it?
It really did. This particular developer only had access to certain things, and they listed some. Basically, it was employee email addresses and names, so they did get that. Some current and past customer contact information and sales leads and vendors. The repositories had third-party libraries that they had modified for Dropbox's use, and that's about it. So as far as breaches go, this is probably as best case scenario you can hope for, assuming that Dropbox is telling us the truth.
Yeah, it's kind of like getting shot at and grazed instead of, taking one to the spleen.
Yeah, it's more of a lesson.
Yeah.
That
Ooh,
you can get
I
better.
didn't pay attention.
I think you can survive without a spleen, right?
It's
probably,
been done,
you
but I
can.
think you still need to
Like
get
organs that it
treated.
would take you have to go through to get to it.
Yeah, that's true. All
Probably
right.
would not.
So you were saying, when you get in, you don't know how long you're going to have. Do you take the approach then? I don't know, Daniel, if like when you get in, you immediately like change the password and turn off MFA, so it's easier for you to get back, or do you get in and kind of hide and hope you're not discovered?
Well, it's like Don said. I mean, if they're probably generating something that will ensure their access after the initial initiation vector for their access is taken away, because you always want to make sure that you can maintain persistence in there. So generate an API key, they have their own token or whatever the case is, so they can continually access these things programmatically usually. And then from there, they're probably just going to kind of like bounce around a little bit. They're going to, especially if you're talking about like,
Do a little shopping.
yeah, well, when you're you're a mature threat actor, you don't just like smash and grab and go crazy and go, oh, look at all the stuff I got, and I'll sell it on the dark web for $5,000 and so on and so forth. They start to figure out, what kind of access do I have? How can I use this to pivot into even more systems? They want to make sure they push the boundary as far as they can while still flying under the radar, because that's going to lead them to have the biggest haul for themselves, and that's what they're looking to do. From there, it's just going to be, how do I exfiltrate this data? Am I going to raise alarms if and when I do this? How's that going to look? What would I do if so? How much can I get? You know, it's a business, right? These people are professionals, and that's what they do. So
Business
they would
is
have
good.
they would also have their own, tactics, tools, and procedures for doing that.
Now, what I thought was interesting is Google, Apple, GitHub in this case, they promote logging in with their credentials as a way to maintain better security. I can log in with my Google account on 20 different services that are out there, and Google gives me MFA and features that those sites might not otherwise give me. But in a scenario like this, it almost encourages the opposite. Like, stop using credentials like these in multiple places and instead use dedicated accounts. And I know I don't like to think of myself as paranoid or that I do security theater or whatever, but whenever I see log in with my Google account or log in with Facebook, well, I don't have a Facebook account, so, but log in with one of these accounts, I always choose the one that says create a new account, just log in with email. I like to have separate credentials for every service because I use a password manager and I manage it that way. If you're having to memorize your password, I could see why you'd want to share it, but this is a kind of a warning for all of you guys out there. Like, here's one of the scenarios that can happen when you use one service's credentials to access a different service.
Yeah. I do the exact same thing. I never use use Google to log in or use GitHub.
Then you got to type in stuff sometimes.
No, because I have a password manager that does that stuff for me. Right?
Like,
But I did.
Email,
I did do that back before I used the password manager. I knew all those passwords by heart, and each of the email addresses that were associated with them, because some people will go as far as creating a new email address for each login service.
Truly siloing.
Oh man, yeah. So if they get access to that, that's all they have access to.
Interesting.
Yep.
Not me. Log in with Facebook.
Peter's like, just annoy me with a barking dog text. I'll click it. Yes, 2FA, geez.
Yeah, fine.
One of the things that pushed me to never use that is Reddit. So Reddit actually had for a while where you could authenticate on other sites with your Reddit login. And then one day Reddit decided they didn't want to do that anymore. So they were like, no, we don't want to support other people's authentication. That's wasting our resources. We don't benefit from it. And so they discontinued the feature. And so if you had signed up on any website using Reddit as your authentication mechanism,
swinging in the wind.
You really were. And,
Yeah.
And some of those websites, like, I want to say ported you over, but helped migrate you over to a different type of authentication. But others, you just lost whatever you had. And so that's where I was like, man, that's true. Like, if GitHub goes out of business tomorrow, do you lose your access to Circle CI? Well, assuming you use it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Not me.
Yep, that is true.
I do. I would lose it.
It just made me think of a scene. Bruce Campbell fans here in the room. He did this movie called My Name is Bruce, right? Or yes, I think My Name is Bruce. And he played himself.
Okay.
And he was basically down and out and living in a trailer in the middle of the woods. And he's talking about how they won't keep him down while he's drinking bourbon out of a dog dish. He's going, not me. No, I am howling. It was so funny.
I have not seen that one.
Oh, dude, you got to watch that one. It's a very
You watched that
entertaining
before or after the new Point Break, which is subtitled Breaking Point?
You mean Fifth of Never?
Yeah,
We were watching
went really
that?
far for that sometime.
Yeah. Did you guys watch the new Weird Al thing yet?
I
Is
did.
it out?
You
Yeah.
did? Yeah,
Oh, I
it's
didn't know
out.
it was out.
Yeah, I
Is it
saw that
streaming?
released. Yeah, it's streaming on Roku channel.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, free.
So I was unsure going into it whether or not it was going to be true or not.
It's not.
And because
From the trailer.
At
from
all.
the trailer, I sucted that it was made up.
Yeah.
And then watching the movie, totally.
Yeah.
But it's entertaining.
Yeah, because when I saw the trailer, I was like, I know a lot about Weird Al. I don't remember any of this.
Yeah.
I didn't know it worked out this much.
Yeah, Daniel Radcliffe is shredded.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's get back to the news with our next article from the AP, apnews.com. Red Cross seeks, quote, digital emblem to protect against hacking. And so how is this different from the little padlock you see on the address bar? Isn't that a digital emblem?
Sort of, yes, but this is an all new thing, so it doesn't exist yet. So we can't really compare it to something that's present. The only thing we can truly compare this to is what the Red Cross does already. When there is a conflict zone or a war or a battle, whatever, people that are in the medical field or are medical personnel of some sort, Red Cross members, they will wear a Red Cross on a white background on their arm. If it's an ambulance, they put the Red Cross on the top of it. So if airplanes are coming in to do a strafing run, they won't blow that up. It's a medical vehicle.
If you're smuggling nuclear weapons, you put a cross on the roof.
Well, that's something that can happen. And that's what I was going to ask Daniel about this. What they're proposing is malware or ransomware gangs are frequently hitting hospitals. And they hit hospitals, they encrypt the machines, and the hospitals are likely to pay because people's lives are in danger. And there's been several times where the ransomware gangs come out and say, oh, we're sorry, we didn't know that was a hospital, we'll undo it, whatever, and back off. So what the Red Cross is saying is, what if we came up with a way to designate on your servers that this is a hospital? And like painting
Because
a Red Cross on the roof.
Hospital.com wasn't like a big sure sign.
Well, so that's what they're proposing, and then that way ransomware not activists, but gangs.
We need more
I know.
ransomware.
Gangs and activists, slightly different
Kids will
things.
protest for
Yeah,
anything.
they will indeed, won't they?
So the gangs can look at it and say, oh no, we don't want to target that. That's a hospital.
Yeah.
Let's move off and target other people. To me, I see several glaring problems with this, but the biggest problem is most people wouldn't want to paint a red cross on top of their car to pretend to be medical. Like there's ethical implications, but I feel like most businesses would not have a problem putting a red cross on their website or whatever to make it.
Or if it's just in
Yeah.
code somewhere,
Yeah.
it's not even seen.
Right.
in
It's
public.
not something that's like very, out in the open.
And then we're also relying on honor amongst thieves here. That I feel like it's more the attention that's focused on them about the hospital hack than the fact that they're actually sorry. They're like, oh, all of a sudden we're not just flying under the radar.
Yeah. Now we're douchebags.
People are mad at us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're gonna find out who we are.
And I don't think they would stop it. Like ransomware gangs, they know they can make money off of hospitals.
Yeah. We're talking about people that with the, highly technical people, very smart people. You think they don't know who they're targeting? You think that's an accident?
Well, I think there are times where it's probably an accident.
Oh,
where they're just
I'm sure
blasting
there's
it out.
like crimes of opportunity.
Yeah.
They just happen to like, oh, look at this, and it's a hospital.
But on the flip side, because you know that they probably have insurance that will pay or that
Right.
they'll pay themselves, does that all of a sudden make you a bigger target? Are people searching for the emblem of
Oh,
hey, these are
maybe.
pretty
Right.
little
Like
Yeah,
pennies?
you
it
I
might.
thought the same thing. Like you're just throwing up a spotlight, going,
Yeah.
well,
don't hack
if
us,
you didn't
we've got
know I
too
was
much
a
money.
hospital
Yeah.
before, you sure do now.
Yeah.
Or medical.
We're in one of the most lucrative businesses in,
Yeah.
in the United States. Don't attack
Yeah,
us.
you don't want that's people's lives, man.
Yeah. It was a couple of years ago that some of the security researchers discovered code inside of ransomware where it would check to see if your keyboard was set to I don't remember if it was just a Cyrillic keyboard or specifically a Russian keyboard, but if you had that keyboard set, it wouldn't encrypt your machine. And what they found was that like the Russian government was allowing these ransomware gangs to operate as long as they didn't target Russians.
Russia, yeah.
And they said, look, hey, if you're a Russian ransomware gang and you target the U.S. or Ukraine or whatever, who cares? That's not us. That's not illegal, right? You do what you want. But the moment they targeted other Russians, it would be a problem. So this seems kind of similar. And it's probably where they got the idea was, hey, if that ransomware can check what keyboard you've got, surely it can check to see if you've got a red cross. And
Now, could you spoof it to say you have that keyboard when you don't?
Yeah. In fact, there were people encouraging you to do that for a little while. They're like, make sure you add the Russian keyboard
Right,
to
profile,
your system. Yeah. Which I don't know if that's effective or not anymore. Do you know, Daniel?
I have no clue. I didn't even hear about that, honestly, that they were using that as a method for testing.
It's like putting text the same color as the background on SEO.
You would think
It
that they
probably
would be
doesn't work
using
anymore.
like IP addresses, and geolocating the IP addresses would be a more effective
Well, they know you're running
method
through several
for-
VPNs as well.
into their country.
Or you could be a Russian national that's working abroad.
But that's
They
true.
just want to protect,
like VPN.
like, hey, Sergey, how did your computer be? How's your computer the one computer not affected? by
because
this
you're
attack
stupid.
company?
Bruce Schneier reported on it in 2021, so about a year ago.
Okay.
And so he actually put out an article adding a Russian keyboard to protect against ransomware. Bruce will frequently jump on things like this, which that may have worked for a little while, but I don't know if it still works today. And
What would be
I
cool
never
is
did
if
it
you
myself.
could use like something similar to like a rubber ducky or whatever, where it was telling you, "I'm a Russian keyboard," and you just plug it in. You don't even have to do anything else.
Well, I think you didn't have to activate it; you just had to have it installed.
Oh,
so
that's it?
Yeah, that was it. And I
Jeez.
know there were some government agencies that were like rolling out this Russian keyboard across their whole environment just because
Now,
of that.
I've made a virus called Russian Keyboard
Yeah.
that you can install.
Have you got problems with Russian hackers and their ransomware?
Yeah.
Install this.
Install this
There you go.
Word file
Just
with
next
macros.
your way through it and say yes to whatever it asks you.
It'll fix all.
That's
your
funny how
problems.
well that works, by the way. Right? where like, I mean, you've worked on, with people that are in the field and they're not tech savvy or whatever. And I could tell them to be installing the worst malware they ever seen in their lives. And I'd be like, yeah, if it prompts you or anything, just next and yes your way through it. And they'll go, oh, okay.
I mean, there's a whole South Park Human Centipede episode specifically about that.
Oh, is it? Oh, yeah,
End user license agreement.
Yeah.
The guy's like, all right, fine, I'll let you all go. Just sign here. And he's, you did it again. Oh, man.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Good stuff. All right, well, let's take a quick break. We've got a lot more news to get to. We're going to find out who got pwned and who was dumb this week, coming up on Technado right after this.
This is Josh. Josh spent $2,500 on a week of classroom training for CompTIA A+ and got certified. Josh got a good job that pays $40,000 per year. This is Jeremy. Jeremy only spent $299 on a full year of training from IT Pro TV, including A+ and 300 other courses. Jeremy also got a great job that pays $40,000 per year. Jeremy used the more than $2,200 he saved in IT training for a fabulous tropical vacation. Now Jeremy is still using his IT Pro TV membership to study for Network Plus and Security Plus to advance his career, but not spending any more money, since all three are included in his IT Pro TV membership, plus 300 more courses. Don't be like Josh. Choose IT Pro TV for your IT training.
IT pros who want to learn on the go? The IT Pro TV Android app is for you. Now it's better than ever with the dashboard view built in. Easily resume viewing, see new courses as they're added, and track your hours viewed. Start up your next episode with the touch of a button to binge watch on the go. Track your progress at a glance, and download episodes as an annual member for offline viewing. Access all IT Pro TV courses with a simple button. Choose landscape mode for larger viewing. Choose your course by category, certification, or job role. Watch anywhere and pick up later on your favorite devices. So head to the App Store and download the IT Pro TV app.
Back to Technado, and as promised, we've got a couple more articles to get to, and this next one, we're going to take a look at who got pwned this week.
Looks like you're about to get pwned.
Fatality.
Yeah!
All right, this article comes to us from TechCrunch.com. AstraZeneca password lapse exposed patient data. And what do we mean password lapse? Is that because that sounds like your password expired and or you were
It
supposed
does
to
kind of
change it?
sound like that, doesn't it? Yeah.
Or like a lapse in judgment.
Because
Well-
my password lapsed, all of a sudden we're exposed.
Yeah.
This is definitely a lapse in judgment, because if your password lapses, you'd get locked out, you'd be more secure.
Sure.
That's true.
No one's getting in.
Yeah.
Yep. In this case, an employee at a pharmaceutical giant, AstraZeneca, if you're not familiar with them, you probably are, right? Because they're like a
Yeah. You are
bazillionaire.
on their medication.
Yeah.
Right now.
You
just don't know it.
Yeah.
They own several countries around the world.
It's in the water.
They had someone on their staff made an amateur mistake, and we're seeing this a lot, sadly, which is they inadvertently published access credentials to some of their infrastructure via a public GitHub repository. You know, when you create a GitHub repo, if you're a paid customer, you can make them private. Actually, free people could do private ones now too, but there's certain benefits they encourage you to do a public one, and if you use it, you get those benefits. So it defaults to repos being public. In this case, one of their employees published a lot of stuff, source code and things that they intended to be public, but it, in one case, contained access credentials to a test and development server. Outside, security researchers found it, but there were evidence of malicious activity where an unauthorized individual, I want to say professional, I guess they are
They are
professionals.
professionals.
An unauthorized professional
They were.
accessed the system and was able to download data using those credentials. So that's a big no-no, especially for a company that dabbles in medical. The second, I know, they're bazillionaires.
understatement
they
of the year.
They got their fingers in a lot
Yeah,
of
we do a
pies.
little medical.
Some a little medical, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Oh.
All right, so amateur mistake number one was publishing your credentials to the internet, right? Amateur mistake number two was on their test servers, they used actual patient data. And that's really like, all right, people leak their credentials. That happens all the time. But if you learn one lesson from Technado today, it should be that in your test and dev environments, you should not have production data. You should have generic random test data.
Don, how am I supposed to make sure that it's actually going to work the same way once I move into production?
Because when you're testing, it's hard to find somebody who has polio or whatever for your database.
I mean, they exist, but yeah.
What was it in House at the end of every episode? They always thought it was something
lupus.
Lupus, right?
Yeah.
So you're not
It's
going to
not
find
lupus.
a patient with lupus, but you need it in your test data. So you make fake patients, and they
What
can
if
have
there's a
every disease
patient-
you want.
What if there's a human actually named Lorem Ipsum? And then you're trying to use that
Yeah,
data.
I wouldn't be surprised if that
Yeah.
existed.
Somebody,
Some developer that did that.
No.
Name their kid Laura.
Don't blame this
I
on
like it.
developers. Some marketing person,
that's true.
one of your people,
Yeah.
has named their kid Lorem Ipsum. That is a fact. That has to have happened.
I'll look it up.
Yeah.
So I did I did look up the company. They are a British-Swedish company, so I got to think there are GDPR implications here big time.
I don't think. I mean, the UK and
Or it doesn't matter where the company's based; it matters where the patient data was from.
That's true.
Right?
Yep, that is true. And even in the UK, you do have the UK GDPR, their own version of it, the UK DPA. So yeah, there'll be some fallout from that. Now they don't really, or at least the article I read didn't say how many people were involved. As far as the breach data, but this is one that could have easily been avoided. Generating random test data is really not a hard thing to do. And a lot of organizations skimp out on it. They think it's easier. We'll just use production data because if our tests work on production data, then it will work in production. It makes sense, but it does open you up to risk because developers, sysadmins, they tend to secure test servers less than they do production
This
servers.
seems so cliche, right? This whole article is just like full of cliches.
Yeah. Stuff you should have known better, right?
Like
Common
this
sense.
Is simple, like basic. Like Wes is teaching a security fundamentals course right now that apparently the people at AstraZeneca need to watch because this is like kiddie stuff when it comes to
Security
publish.
fundamentals is not for everyone.
Yeah, apparently,
Some people
yeah.
have adverse reactions.
Yeah. If
Do you suffer
experience-
from moderate to severe security lapses?
Yeah, if you experience chronic or severe,
You know how hard it is to search if someone's name is Lorem Ipsum? 'Cause
Yeah.
I found an article on ohbabynames.com, and I was like, oh, wow, someone did. And
was
it's
just
just a
like a
Lorem
test,
Ipsum.
yeah.
And I'm finding all these test pages.
Yeah.
Go on Facebook and search for somebody named Lorem
There
Ipsum.
you go. There you go. Lauren Ipsum.
Lauren Ipsum.
There you go.
Stanley Ipkiss.
All right. Well, AstraZeneca, the moral of the story is they are
Don't do drugs.
a company that makes literally billions of dollars around the globe. They have just hundreds of millions in research funds. Like if somebody could secure their network, it seems like these guys could do it. But they didn't.
Well, Don, that's a lot of work. It's kind of hard, and
Why
I
bother?
ain't got the time for that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Maybe they're too big to fail. right?
there.
Like,
Hey, what are you gonna do? You gonna shut me down? I'm AstraZeneca.
There is some truth to that.
Yeah,
Right? These
right.
companies that, what were the
It's-
OxyContin?
That was
What company is that?
What's the name of that company?
Like
There's like a name. of
Purdue
it.
Pharma?
Purdue. That's
Was
it.
it Purdue?
Yep, the chicken people. And
Really?
yeah,
I didn't-
no, it's
They're
not the
pumping
chicken
that
people,
stuff
but
in the chicken. That's what I heard.
Purdue.
That's why the chicken's so good.
They, they got fined what $4 billion or something, and they had no problem paying that.
Like,
They paid it out
oh
of petty
no.
cash.
Yeah.
Petty cash.
Yeah, someone cut a check. There are a lot of people named Lorem Ipsum on Facebook, but I don't believe that these are real people.
Yeah, that one's a cartoon.
Yeah, where they're from. Yeah, I don't,
Nice.
I'm not believing it. I got to
Some
check
things-
LinkedIn.
I don't think we can say that one on the show.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
I gotta know because I feel like it was not Purdue.
Oh, it's Purdue Pharma because it was. I mean, that a lot of people have paid out in those lawsuits, like even like Walmart and stuff, and Walgreens, all the pharmacies that
Shelled out the worst drug
that
ever
were
made.
involved,
My
yeah.
God, man.
they're like, well, it's a profitable drug, so you define worst drug.
now the family had a different last name. If
family,
you're
right.
thinking of the family, but the
So yeah, you're right. It's Purdue Pharma. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, because I always remember it by that it was like they had a weird last name. It started with an S. If I'm not mistaken.
Sadlers.
Sadlers.
Yep, there we go.
That's it.
That's the family.
Yeah,
name
that's
you're
the
saying?
family. Yeah, that's what I was thinking of.
So, I don't feel bad for AstraZeneca.
Sacklers.
Sackler? That was
Sacklers,
close.
yeah.
I don't feel bad for AstraZeneca because,
William Sadler's out there. It wasn't
they're-
me.
It's Adam Sandler going,
Yeah.
no. They're all going to laugh at you.
if
I'm
only
sorry.
Rob Schneider were here
Yeah.
to save us. Because they've certainly got the money to suck this one up and they'll be fine. That's not
yeah.
going to shut the company down or anything.
Yeah.
But it is an interesting thing where some basic end user security awareness, some
Would've went a
basic
long way.
education, it would have gone a long way and could have prevented this. Absolutely.
All right. Well, our next segment is the Doe segment where someone did something dumb. And honestly,
wasn't
how
this.
that article didn't make it in there means that this one's got to be nuts. So let's take a look at our Doe
Man,
segment.
shoot self in head.
Speaking of the joke there, I put an article in, and I just missed Don's deadline today, but about the guy who originally made the Oculus headset
Oh, yeah.
has
Oh,
now
yeah.
made a version that if you die in the game, you die in real life. It's got a bomb in it,
No.
and he's working on an
Like,
anti.
he made a real one?
Yes, and he's working on an anti-tamper or like a tamper-proof one, so you can't.
I don't
take it
think
off
you're
once the game
allowed to
starts.
build stuff like
Isn't that like the premise of one of the Saw movies?
Yeah,
Yeah,
basically.
well, he's got to be doing this in an island somewhere where he has a
Right?
compound. This
Yeah.
is not the kind of thing.
Why would you make this?
Well, he probably wants it for himself after all the
Let's hope
promises
so.
he's made over like Magic Leap being this revolutionary thing, and then it turns out to be a Segway scooter.
Well, we've talked about Teams meetings moving to the metaverse. I would like that for a Teams meeting now. If, like,
Yeah.
That is a stupid idea, Daniel. Here's the button. Anyway, Doe, let's find out what stupid thing happened this week, and this is on Phoronix.com. The Linux kernel has been forcing different behavior for processes starting with X. All right, so you're going to have to explain this one to me a little bit.
All right. So what they mean is that if you have a process, if you run a binary, and the binary's name starts with the letter X, the kernel treats it differently than any other binary. And what's happening is there's a piece of bad code put in, a little kernel kludge.
little class warfare in the
Yeah,
Linux
yeah.
kernel.
So there's been kind of a nerd war going on in the background of Linux for the last few years over the desktop environment, and many Linux distros use x.org for their desktop compositor and all that. Wayland has since replaced a lot of that, so systems have been moving over to
Waylon
Wayland.
Jennings, yeah.
Wayland Jennings.
It's actually
Just a
he
good
wrote it
old
himself.
boy.
A lot of time on the road on the tour bus,
It
and
never meaning
Yeah, it's been,
no harm.
been coding. Yeah.
So one problem with x.org or even the older x11 is nobody wants to write code for it. It's old. It's ancient, right? It's been around since the early 90s, late 1980s. It's been around a long, long time. So all the code development is happening in newer systems like Wayland. And there was a bug, a problem inside of X that would cause some of the features that are used for drawing and outputting data onto the screen that just cause problems, bugs that would cause display issues. And so somebody put a quick check in the kernel that would say, when a binary is run, if it is a X binary, so part of X Windows or Xorg or X11 or whatever, then it would disable certain features and then allow the binary to run to fix the bug, right? Well, unfortunately, the way they wrote the check didn't actually look to see if it was an X binary. It looked to see if the binary started with the letter X, which meant anything. So
Anything else.
Yeah, anything.
you could run Xterm,
Yeah.
right? Which most people run X. That's your default terminal in most systems. And so Xterm would have certain features disabled for it, and you wouldn't even know it. It mostly came with like how the display modes were set in the system. So if you needed to change resolution, which Xterm doesn't normally do.
So just name on my malware X something, and I'm good.
No,
well,
take away things.
Or it'll stop it.
it would stop it from being able to change the screen resolution.
Okay, that's
So
fine.
not that big of a
Okay,
deal,
Can't have
right?
that.
Well, it says it was a hack.
But it's interesting. You mentioned something about this earlier, Daniel. Is we put a lot of trust in the open source software that we use and software that's been developed by other people. And to have a bug like this one, it's somewhat a beginner's mistake. That instead of somebody fixing the underlying software, they just put a kludge right in the kernel, and it got greenlit, and it's been there for. I forget how long. It's been there for years, I believe.
I would think that something is not happening, or not making its way to the kernel without getting checked and double checked by others. Does that just mean that either A, they aren't doing that, or B, those people just kind of overlooked it as well?
They overlooked it as well, because even like Linus Torvalds would have seen this.
Yeah.
He ultimately approves a lot of this.
You think they're just kind of looking at the dynamic running code and going, well, everything seems to be working well.
They read it like in the Matrix. They're just watching it
and they're not
fly by.
necessarily
Yeah.
like going through every little snippet of actual like static
Apparently
code.
not.
So I'm not a developer,
Yeah.
but I can write a little bit of Python and Bash scripts like crazy, right?
Yeah.
So I looked at the code that was referenced, and when I glanced over it, the way I read it is it looked like it was looking for binaries that are actually named X, which, when you run x.org, x11, xfree86, all of them, their main binary is just the letter X. So to me, that made sense. And I read it, and that's what it looked like. So apparently, though, when the code actually runs, it's just checking if the first letter is X. And I wouldn't have known that from having read the
So
code.
this is that sample
this
code
is
that's
the
at the
code?
top here, where it says equals the two equal signs
Yeah.
and X.
Oh, you guys both have it pulled up.
Yeah. there we
Yeah,
go.
so see where it says,
check.
current dash com 0 equals
I
and
wonder if
X
that's
in
what the
single
two
parentheses.
equals is. Maybe.
Yeah.
No, that's
No?
comparison in
Oh, okay.
programming. That's
Alright.
normal. Yep.
Interesting.
So they're saying, if the current executable equals X. So to
and
me,
the required
You would think they only
va-
named one.
or the rec value equals 1. So both those things have to be true because that's
Yep.
a logical and.
but apparently when this is applied by the kernel, it's just checking the first letter and ignoring
Right.
the rest of the word. So that's where the bug falls in. And so if I were the one reviewing this, which first off would be a mistake because I'm not a developer, I wouldn't have caught the bug. So I'm guessing just other people were doing quick reviews and said, okay, look, they're stopping mode setting for X.
This is interesting that works though. It's a capital X.
Yeah.
Right. It's not a lowercase x or.
But when it's applied,
it's
it's not case sensitive.
It's
Yep.
not case sensitive. So it's saying that this must equal X, and usually, like when I write, you probably you as well. You probably realize this, that when you're making statements that are doing comparisons, like say I've got this current com of 0, and whatever's in there equals X. I mean, that's quoted out. It wouldn't be anything after that. It's not like X. It's not globbing X. It doesn't look like it anyway, but apparently it is.
Apparently so. Yeah, it's however it's applied. And what made it worse is this actually did get put in 3 years ago.
Hmm.
And since then, the underlying software has been patched to remove that problem. So it just doesn't use those features anymore. So it wasn't even a necessary thing. And so the developer who found it has already done a pull request to get that removed and pulled out. It's not pulled out yet, but it's likely not something that's affecting us. Like I said, it's the set mode functionality.
Yeah.
The software changing your screen resolution, which most software doesn't do. So it's not really that big of a deal. But the dough part here is it made it through all the checks, got all the way into the kernel, and has been sitting there
It was
for
there
years.
3 years, yeah.
And it's just code that doesn't do what it's supposed to do.
All the while, somebody at some company that makes something called X something is like, "Why is this not working?"
Yeah.
More than likely, yeah.
And now you know. All right, that is a fun one. All right, we got a couple of things coming up today. As a matter of fact, we have a little webinar for you that will be taking place with Daniel. It's the Cybersecurity Podcast with Gerald Auger, PhD. Auger, that's what I said. I was just testing you. Auger, PhD of Simply Cyber. So that will be a fun kind of new format again, where people can ask in questions throughout, and we'll be answering those for you. And Daniel and Gerald will be doing that. So head over to itpro.tv/webinars. Register for that. Takes place at 2 p.m. Eastern Time here on November 9th. And if you're past that time, don't worry. You can still go and see it on demand after the fact. It'll be up early the following week for you, along with all of our old webinars. And then taking place on Thursday, November 17th, is IT Pro's first annual, I'm willing to declare it, Turkey Bowl. We're going to give away some prizes, play some games here, have a lot of fun instead of doing the typical webinar thing to change things up for the holiday season. That is, of course, unless we are all taken out by the hurricane. That is.
What's the hurricane's name?
It's like Catherine or.
See, we don't even know.
Yeah. By this point, you're like, what? Nicole.
Nicole.
Yeah,
Hurricane Nicole.
little
Eggert.
Nicole. She's on her way.
But is it a hurricane or is it?
It's
it was
not, but it
a
will be.
subtropical storm. Last I looked.
They say it will be a hurricane by the time it hits Florida. It is destroying the Eastern
Absolutely.
Bahamas right now.
All right.
Well,
Destroying it?
no, I don't know. It's on
No,
its way.
it's still out in the middle.
I'm trying to
of-
predict because we're taping the podcast one day and it's happening another day. So I'm trying to predict what's going to be happening. Hey, also while
What a
you're on
negative
that
Nancy.
internet,
Yeah.
checking out the hurricane path, head over to Technado.com and you can see all the latest episodes of the podcast. You can send in some viewer mail, and you can also click the big orange button that says sponsored by IT Pro, and you can get 30% off of your membership, your personal membership there. So go ahead and check that out. You can also request a team trial and get a demo and let your team try it out and see the Pro Portal and all that good stuff. So check that out over at Technado.com. All right, guys. Another good week here, and I'm off to IT Nation and talk to some MSPs down in
The
Orlando.
nation of IT.
The
Nice.
yeah.
They finally made it happen,
The
didn't they?
ConnectWise folks doing that.
They won their independence.
They did. Yeah, it's one of those sovereign state people.
Yeah.
Good luck pulling me over,
Yeah,
cop.
that's right.
I've got a semicolon after my name or whatever. What's the technicality they use?
Oh, I have no idea.
Or the name is all capitalized.
Haven't heard
It's-
that.
I have
No,
not heard
no,
this.
it's all part of the conspiracy.
Oh, good. I'll go check that out. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll see you next week right here on Technado.